Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. It's your host, Margarita Lyadova, and do I have an interesting episode for you today? Buckle up because this intro is longer than usual, but hopefully no less entertaining. Let's address the elephant in the room. It's the week of Valentine's Day. Okay, well, maybe it's not an elephant in the room for everyone, but chances are that if you're single, you're aware that it's Valentine's Day, and you may have mixed feelings about it. This week's episode is going to address said elephant in the room because today I'm bringing you somewhat of an overnight sensation of a Jewish matchmaker, Delaney Fox. Delaney Fox is a 28-year-old Jewish matchmaker and dating coach currently residing in Nashville, Tennessee with her boyfriend, Sam. Originally from the Baltimore area, Delaney ventured down south to the University of Georgia for school, where she studied elementary education, began her first business called Minutes for Moms, and made her very first successful match. She grew up in a conservative Jewish home that placed immense value on culture, tradition, and community aspects of Judaism. Throughout her life, Delaney was always what you might consider a super Jew, or someone who is very engaged in the Jewish community and various organizations. With a diverse Jewish network that spans far and wide, Delaney is on a mission to bring back Jewish matchmaking in a very big way amongst the broader young Jewish professionals community across the country. Her mission and the number one goal is to help create more strong Jewish families, starting with strong Jewish relationships. I referred to Delaney as an overnight sensation because she started her matchmaking account on Instagram, and all of a sudden it grew very quickly. I learned of Delaney maybe in the spring of 2024 when my friend Carly sent me her account and said, "Hey, look, you should apply via Delaney's Google form to be in her matchmaking pool." I applied and noticed right away that Delaney has a very specific process she follows and that she sets up little intro chats with the people that fill out her form. We ended up doing the intro chat together, and I realized that Delaney is not just another Jewish matchmaker. Now, we just had the episode with Eliza Ben Shalom come out a few weeks ago, and this will be a perfect opportunity to compare and contrast how someone like Eliza may do matchmaking versus Delaney. For those who are not familiar, let me briefly walk you through how Jewish matchmaking typically operates. Usually, a single person will hire a matchmaker for a lump sum, flat fee amount for a few months. In those few months, the matchmaker will guarantee a certain amount of matches, dates, etc., but of course, no guarantee that you'll meet your soulmate. And in this episode, we also discuss the pros and cons of this lump sum model. But more broadly speaking, I want to go as far as to say that I don't think a lot of matchmaking works or is legit. In the Jewish community, there's a very finite pool of people, and matchmakers ended up fighting for the same clientele. When they caught on to this, they had pivoted to do more of a collaboration model where now multiple matchmakers may combine pools and try to set up their clients together. In that scenario, multiple matchmakers would have access to the same people, but then it becomes this thing of may the best match win. Even in these instances, when matchmakers want to set up their client with someone from another pool or ask other matchmakers like, hey, do you have a girl with this criteria? They end up being very dodgy about who the client is that they're matching for because they're scared of another matchmaker facilitating a match, and then the original matchmaker won't be paid for it. There's like a first mover advantage component to the current prevailing financial model of how matchmaking operates. I hope I didn't confuse the shit out of you there, but as my whole spiel illustrates, the complexity of what's going on here with like a ton of cooks in the kitchen and the misalignment of how matchmakers get compensated, it basically creates this dynamic where singles don't actually end up getting the service that they're aspiring to have. And that's why you hear tons of Jewish people like, I spent 10 grand on 3 months and I didn't end up meeting anybody. And there's a lot of frustration and resentment around matchmaking. Now, I've also heard that there are some matchmakers who work differently and they'll like receive some kind of funding from a billionaire or philanthropist. For example, that funding goes to pay their salaries and then they'll work as a matchmaker full time. But I don't actually think this is that common or the norm. All that is to say, for Jewish matchmaking and beyond, it's become abundantly clear to me as a consumer of these matchmaking services that matchmakers prefer to work together because they're not nearly as successful on their own. And there's a lot of challenging components of being a matchmaker and how to navigate the landscape and even how to get paid for your work that makes this a little bit difficult. Now, the dodginess I spoke about with matchmakers hiding their client is one you experience when you're a potential match, not even when you're another matchmaker. In order to work with a matchmaker, you don't have to be a paying client. You can just sign up at a matchmaker's pool, and if that matchmaker has a paying client that you're a good match for, they will reach out to you. And in that case, you don't have to pay anything at all. It's the client who pays. Now, Delaney doesn't do this, but with a lot of Jewish matchmaking, when the matchmaker reaches out to you about their client, they often refuse to give a picture. The matchmaker asks to meet you to learn more about you and see if you are a good match for their client. They don't really care if the client is a good match for you. And as my former podcast guest and Jewish matchmaker Shayna Tibi said, you end up getting matched with some ogre who isn't at all compatible physically or otherwise with you. This is something that always drove me up the wall about matchmaking. You're trying to sell me on your client, not the other way around. Why should I answer your questions or give you my time if I'm not sure that I'm even interested? You're not my matchmaker. I don't really trust your judgment about who I should or shouldn't meet. So personally, I will not accept a blind match. And I think that matchmakers are finding that with access to so many people on apps and otherwise, the blind match is going to leave them with crickets. With that said, even when a matchmaker does reach out and does send me a photo of their client, 99% of the time, my experience has been that this is a guy that I would never consider. Because again, the matchmaker has the incentive to pitch their client to anyone that the client likes, which means people who are out of their league sometimes. Anyway, I feel like I sound a Jewish princess right now, but I am telling you, if you speak to anybody who has been part of these matchmaking pools and has received communication from matchmakers, they will affirm everything that I've said. On that note, I want to move us on to talk about how I attempted to do a Jewish matchmaking free trial with a Jewish matchmaker, which ended up being a total sham. When I lived in Philly, a girl that's my age who was very well connected in the community said that she was starting a matchmaking business. I was very excited about it because I figured she's young, she's like me, she'll get it. And so to build her client book, she offered anyone who signed up a 1-month free trial. In that month, for anyone who signed up in her book, she would look for matches for them completely for free. Now, she didn't guarantee a match in that month, but she would look and she'd set it up if there was a match. And it would be completely free. So I signed up and the clock on my free trial started ticking. I met with her just a day or two after I signed up, and she immediately told me that I had a match. And the best part, that he was Russian-speaking Jewish like me. I was so excited. And at this point, I was still basically in the first week of my free trial. After getting off the phone, she assured me that she would set up the date with my match. She then proceeded to disappear for a week. I followed up with her and she apologized for the delay and said that she was waiting on the guy to confirm the date. I remember, I think at some point I even asked her, can you just tentatively set the date and connect us and then cancel if needed so that we're still in the trial window? But again, she didn't respond. And then just a day or two before the trial ends, she finally emails me back to let me know, surprise, your date is ready. But unfortunately, your trial is going to be over by the time you go on the date. So in order to go on the date, you'd have to pay for the first month of matchmaking. So effectively what happened is she had a guy for me that she intentionally held out on purpose so that she could charge me. I emailed her back, and in the most respectful way I could, I told her I'm not interested, I won't be moving forward, and that I see basically what she's doing. She had the match for me the day that we met, which was effectively a month ago at this rate, and she held it out and ignored my communication on purpose so that she could find a way to charge me. She then responded to me and said basically some version of, oh, okay. And then I remember this vividly. She wrote, well, when you're serious about dating, please feel free to reach out. And to that I say, well, when you're serious about offering free trials, please feel free to reach out. Now, to close the loop on this whole thing, Philly is not a big Jewish community, okay? Everyone knows everybody. And the funniest part of this whole story with this matchmaking service is I actually know the guy that the matchmaker wanted to set me up with. Believe it or not, there aren't that many Russian-speaking Jews in Philly. And I know him very well. He's a great guy. He's actually a great friend of mine. And we're not a match. And the interesting thing is we happen to have already been acquainted. This woman was going to set me up with someone I already knew quite well. And the craziest part of this whole thing is he must have been like one of the only guys that signed up for a matchmaking service, or she didn't have that many guys in the service, because she started setting him up on dates with a lot of different women in the pool, and a lot of them were not great matches for him. And she wouldn't offer a photo, so he couldn't vet in any way beforehand. And finally, he was like, hey, I don't want to go on these dates if these are going to be blind dates that never had a chance to lift off the ground. So yeah, don't know where her matchmaking service is at now, but that was my experience. Anyway, let's get back to Delaney. Poor Delaney, who has nothing to do with this story or rant, but she has very much learned a lot about the matchmaking space and how to navigate this industry. As you'll hear, she is an entrepreneur at heart. She's always looking for ways to solve problems creatively and in a long-term way. And so you'll get to see how she's trying to solve not only the compensation issue, but also just the general issue of how Jewish people date today. Something that I had a chance to chat with her offline about is that many people today have different dating norms and dating expectations. And in the Jewish community specifically, being Jewish has unfortunately become more political. Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist, all these denominations end up having a correlation with politics, which is creating a misalignment of values for people. And also, some people who don't necessarily practice Judaism would call themselves Reform or just Jewish, but their belief system is more traditional or conservative. So in other words, in the community, the physical practice of Judaism and your philosophy on Judaism can be different. So people will end up calling themselves Reform, but when you talk to them about what they believe, it's really a conservative mentality. Additionally, a more liberal and progressive society has caused women to take on what were traditionally considered masculine roles. And in this changing landscape, daters are struggling to understand. Do I offer to pay? Do I make the plan? Do I let him hold the door for me? Do I text him first? And Delaney is really hoping to even out the playing field for daters by trying to remove these potential places for differences and just let people figure out if they like each other, door holding aside. To wrap up this roller coaster of an introduction, I'll finish with this. The Jewish community has always liked and respected matchmaking, not only in the olden days, but even today. Think about Meet Jew during the pandemic or Loop, the newest matchmaking app. People are always willing to sign up for a chance to find love. And Delaney was someone who tried every single app, matchmaking site, group, forum, everything under the sun. And she struggled too. She intimately understands the woes of our generation, and she's trying to fix with her matchmaking company some of the ways she thinks that we're underserved. And she does this for all Jewish people, women, men, straight, LGBTQ+, etc. And that to me is a true people Jew want to know. Okay, please enjoy this episode. Hello, Delaney. Welcome to People Jew Want to Know podcast. How are you today?
I'm so good, Margarita. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I've spoken to many Jewish matchmakers before, but none like you. So without further ado, my question for you is, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm a connector. I love community building, networking, bringing people together. And while I'm currently a Jewish matchmaker and dating coach, it's definitely not where I thought my career would take me. I attended school at the University of Georgia. I studied education, but at the time, I think my thought process was something like, I love kids, I can't handle blood, this should work. And by the time I hit the end of my freshman year, I had blown through all of my savings for school and I had to figure something out. So I started babysitting for families in my hometown that summer. but with a little bit of a twist. Instead of your classic summer nanny job that didn't pay so well, I took all of the highest paying tiny little jobs that nobody else wanted, and they were each a couple hours a week, and I stacked them up into a full summer schedule. And let me tell you, I was living. I made so much money that summer. I thought I was rich as a 19-year-old. The types of jobs that I was stacking up were jobs like driving kids to and from DC for summer camp, tutoring second graders in math, and picking up kids and taking them to swim team practice very early in the morning. So all different kinds of things, but things that helped out parents and made their lives a little bit easier. I worked my tuchus off, and it was worth it. So the following summer, I went in to do the same thing, and I had so many people asking for my help that I started matching my friends up with these families. First, it was like 5 or 6, and then 20, just for fun because I loved connecting people. And a couple months later, I had a business. So Minutes for Moms is my business, and it essentially connects families and non-medical care providers. We do the vetting, scheduling, payment, and placement of care providers. And I think about a year later after that, I was working really full-time on that business while I was in school, on the student board at Chabad, in a sorority, the whole nine. And at that point, I knew I wasn't going to be a teacher anymore. But with 1 year left, I had already committed. So I taught for a few years out of college, and while I was doing that, I grew my business to 500 contractors and about 1,000 families, and was teaching full-time as a classroom teacher. But by year 3, I left my teaching job to focus on the business and growing the technology aspect of it, and it was wonderful. It was like my business school, and it got me really excited about growing communities and businesses, and all of that entrepreneurial excitement kind of, wore off though by 2023. And I really wanted to try something new. I had an itch to start something, and I just didn't know what that was. So I tried a bunch of different things, and then October 7th happened, and it became very clear to me that my next venture had to be something with tangible impact in the Jewish community. There was no question about it in my mind. I really wanted to connect and feel excited about what I was doing every day, and I knew that was going to be what helped me do just that. So I started brainstorming, and about a month later, I got a call from a friend who was really struggling to find someone Jewish. He had just come off of a 6-month contract with a major matchmaker, and he was feeling really defeated. He's like, if I just spent all this money for a 6-month contract with the matchmaker, how come I haven't found someone? How come it's so hard for me? And he said, Delaney, if anyone can find me someone, it's you. I know you set people up. I know you've done it before. You have the network. Can you just try? And I said, sure, I'll give it a shot. I think you're crazy, but I'll give it a shot. And I posted a little anonymous bio for him on my personal Instagram story. And a couple hours later, I was being introduced to a bunch of different women. And while none of them were for him, they were all fabulous and amazing catches. So I knew I had to find them someone. So at that point, I knew this was it. I will also add that Minutes for Moms is still very much intact. It's been running for 8 years in the Maryland, D.C. metropolitan area. And now my number one priority in my day-to-day is focused on Dating by Delaney, which is my matchmaking service.
That's awesome, Delaney. You're definitely an entrepreneur at heart. It just makes me excited when I meet entrepreneurs who are trying to solve real issues that every person experiences. And I want to learn a little bit more about your matchmaking process, because it's not like every Jewish matchmaker. You grew up with a strong Jewish identity, but you also, as someone that's my peer and we're the same age, are very much a modern dater. You dated on all the dating apps. You are part of the generation that has become predominantly an online dating generation. And so in speaking to you, I learned that your matchmaking process is unique because it tries to blend traditional Jewish shidduch with the dynamics of modern dating that we see today that are more palatable to what I would consider secular Jews or cultural Jews or Jews who are just Jewish. So can you walk us through what your matchmaking process looks like and how it is unique from the other types of Jewish matchmaking we typically hear of?
So definitely, like you said, there's a lot of inspiration that comes from the shidduch dating process. There's a lot of structure, and there's two pieces to the reasoning here. Number one, I feel like I wanted the framework of our Jewish culture and tradition of shidduch dating that's been passed down, lador vador, from generation to generation for thousands of years to be used. I think we're so lucky to have it, and it would be just a shame not to use this guidance and wisdom. So number one, I really wanted to use a lot of the framework from that. But at the same time, like you said, as a traditional Jewish American, someone who's not quite as observant as the typical candidate for shidduch dating, I really wanted to put a modern American twist on it to make it more approachable for people like you and I. And I think when I first started dating, matchmaking was never presented as an option for me. I was starting to date seriously, and I was really looking for all of the options. Like you said, I was on the apps. I was doing everything that was readily available to me because I was really serious and dating intentionally for marriage. However, there was no guidance or framework for how to date intentionally. No mentor, no feedback, just literally everyone in my family asking, why haven't you found someone yet? And I was so tired of that question. But my parents happened to be matched by their parents, and my aunt and uncle by my parents just 30 years ago. But matchmaking still felt to me as an outsider like they'd gotten really lucky, like a story from a rom-com rather than a thoughtful, calculated intro of two people with shared values and goals. And that's really what it was. But I know so many of the daters that I work with feel the same way. They have stories like this from their parents or their grandparents or their siblings, and they're feeling like, what about me? And that's where this modern twist on the shidduch dating comes in. I have to meet people where they are. I'm not asking them to totally change their lifestyle, commit to this traditional shidduch dating, commit to never living together before marriage or getting engaged within a few months. That would be like the blind leading the blind, because I certainly am not doing that. But taking the wisdom, like I said, and modernizing it, I think is really important in order to break down the old habits that have been built by daters through the dating app culture, the hookup culture, and both of those two cultures have really become the norm for daters in our age group. And I wanted everyone to start on a level playing field with clear expectations and clear boundaries. And in order to do that, when so many people have different background knowledge and experiences, I decided to build a super structured framework for the first 3 dates that, again, resembles the shidduch dating, but is totally fresh and new for people like us. So with that in mind, of course, there's adjustments as needed. Some folks are less traditional than others. There are a lot of people meeting long distance and so on. But at its core, when I'm matching men and women, the men are courting. They're planning the dates. They're paying for the dates. They're walking her home. And before the guys come after me, because I know they will, let me add that I also advise initial dates to be casual. Cocktail at a neighborhood bar, beer and games at a local brewery, ice cream and a walk around the park, just super casual. You should not break the bank. On top of this courting process, though, I've got some rules, and everybody who's met with me knows that I always laugh when I say this. I literally can't help myself because I start this list, this crazy list of all of my rules, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so much. To spare your listeners, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to highlight a few of my favorites, which have grown to become very popular and well-loved amongst daters I work with. I think you would be included in that well-loved audience of these rules. But the first is that I ask daters not to look up their date online. Rather, have a trusted friend or family member do it for safety reasons only if they want to, and give them a simple yes approved or no they're not, no details. I really want people going in fresh with an open mind, ready to get to know their date, not showing up to the date having already seen what their ex-girlfriend or boyfriend looked like from high school, from Instagram, or their mom's name and that she has mutual friends with their mom. They don't need to know any of those things going into the date. They just need to show up getting to know that person.
Do they see a photo of the date before they go, or you ask them to do a blind?
Oh, I definitely show a photo.
Okay, great. That's also something unique, I would say, to your process, because a lot of matchmakers, that initial screen that they do, they won't share any photos of their client. And that's one of the issues that I always had dating on those like Jewish matchmaking sites or submitting for like 3-Day Rule or New York City matchmaking, was they are asking for my time, but they're not giving me anything in return because I'm not their client, right? And so it's like an asymmetry there, where I'm not getting anything in return and they have a lot more information about me than I do about their client. So that's something I really appreciate about your process. Anyway, please continue.
So I definitely show pictures and I share a little bit of information. I don't share too much information with people, but I give them a little bit, enough to get them excited about the person, but not so much that they don't have anything new to ask them about when they actually get on the date. So they see a few pictures, they get a little bit of information, and they always have the opportunity to ask more questions about the person, but that's up to them. If they want to go in totally fresh, they absolutely can do that too. It really depends on the person, and it seems to be that as I build rapport with someone and have set them up multiple times, they ask less and less questions about the person. But a lot of times when I set someone up for the first time, they have a lot of questions, which is totally understandable because they're still getting to know me and trusting who I'm going to set them up with. On that note, the other rule that everybody really loves is the texting and communication rules. I ask that daters keep texting and all communication to logistics only during the first 3 dates. I ask them to utilize me as a go-between for those first 3 dates so that they're not communicating unnecessarily. And I think a lot of daters really love this rule in particular because they're used to having to spend weeks texting on an app before actually getting on a date. And in this case, they're really pushed to be present on the date. Recently, I had lunch with a couple that I set up, and the guy was telling me it felt so weird not to text her in between the dates. For example, she had told him that she had a really big thing coming up for work that week, and it was in between their first date and their second date. And he was telling me that in a normal situation, he would have texted her to ask how that event went at work. And in this case, he couldn't do that. So instead, he had to remember and ask her when they got together for that next date, hey, how did that thing go for work? And I think this is really cool, even though it seems so simple, because instead of just having a quick text exchange, which also is very thoughtful, you're having an opportunity to really have a conversation about that experience and get to know each other really well, instead of just quickly exchanging, hey, how did that go? And the person saying, oh, it went great, thanks for asking. You're really getting to know each other. And I think that's really cool because you have so much more to talk about when you actually get on the date. It keeps things really exciting and it keeps the progression of getting to know one another going really nicely through those first 3 dates. After the third date, if they'd like to continue seeing each other, the rules are dropped and they're on their own. Of course, I'm still here to support people as needed, God willing, until they're married. But the nice thing about these rules altogether is that there's no ghosting, no wondering, no overanalyzing. And whenever possible, be it positive or negative, I always try to give people feedback.
I have so many thoughts about this process. The first, I'll comment that I think what you're doing with creating these rules takes the small logistical things that prevent a date from happening in the first place off the table. And that's so important because anyone who's single will agree with me. Countless times you have matched with somebody on an app and you've talked and then it goes nowhere and it dies for whatever reason, or like the guy doesn't plan, or he'll be like, where do you want to go? And it's like, I don't know. Aren't you asking me out? And like, these are the logistical little nightmares that prevent a date from happening. One of the famous debates that my friends and I often have is what happens at the end of the date. This is the hypothetical scenario that I'm going to walk you through. You go on a first date. You are a woman. You're with a man, right? The man asks you out for a drink. You have a great time on the date and the date's wrapping up. He asks for the check. The check comes out. You as a woman, what do? You have 3 options, right? You could say, thank you so much. I've had a great time, and just look at them. You could reach towards your bag, which is known as the bag fumble, right? Pretend like you're looking for your wallet. And the guy could be like, no, like, I've got it. Or you could look at them and be like, should we split this? And they could be like, yes, at which point you'll guess that they're not interested. Or they could be like, no, I got this. It's my treat. Like, I've had a great time, whatever, right? So those are typically the options that happen on a date. My position is that if a man has asked me on a date for a drink, I'm not going to offer to pay for the drink that they asked me out on. I will thank them. I will tell them how much I enjoyed my time with them and that I would like to see them again. But I'm not going to fumble in my bag. I'm not going to say, should we split this? Because it's a core dating value for me that in the courting process, the man treats the woman when they ask them on a date. Now, there's been many times when I'm like on date 3 or 4 and I've appreciated getting to know this person. So I'll text them and be like, hey, do you want to do this and this with me? I plan the whole thing start to finish and I pay for it as a token of my gratitude and appreciation and as an opportunity to demonstrate reciprocity. But that first date, I'm never going to offer. It has always been my philosophy that if a man has an issue with that, they're probably not the right guy for me because their core dating value is different from my core dating value. Now, what you do is you take those hypotheticals off the table entirely to make sure the date can go smoothly. But the question for you is, are those kinds of things dating deal breakers or not?
Should they be dating deal breakers? I think it really depends on the person. I think for someone like you, absolutely. I think going into a date and knowing, like you said, that the person has asked you out and is treating you and is going to get to know you is extremely important. There's an element of masculinity and femininity that really come into play here. And I think there has to be a balance. And what I tell a lot of guys is, you know, for those first 3 dates, you are courting, you are treating, you are doing these things. And then, like you said, after that point, once you've gotten to know each other well and you've treated several times, it's okay if you want to alternate every now and again and the woman can treat you. But you're showing up how you'd like to lead the relationship. And I think most women who are looking for a more traditional balance of roles are looking for a guy who's going to steer the ship, who's going to lead the relationship. And I think your showing up is showing this woman how you're going to do that in the future. So you're setting the tone for how you're getting to know each other. You're setting the tone for the potential of a future relationship. If you can't align during those first few dates, then there's no future for that relationship. And so I think it's really important for people to align there. Now, like I said, some people are more traditional than others. So depending on the person, this is not appropriate for everyone. And I have couples that I work with where the women feel very strongly that they'd like to alternate. So on the second date, they say, no, I got this. I'm going to pay for it. And then on the third date, the guy does. The one thing I feel extremely strongly about, and I think most matchmakers do as well, absolutely no splitting. If you're seeing this person, you're not splitting the check. Splitting the check is for friends, and treating one another is for dating.
You heard that, gentlemen? Splitting the check is for friends. Thanks, Delaney. This is super interesting. The other thought I had while you were speaking about your matchmaking process, the delicate subject of how do matchmakers get paid? In a traditional matchmaking setting, you gave the example of your friend who did a 6-month contract with a matchmaker. In that scenario, I imagine that friend paid some kind of lump sum to that matchmaker, and they worked with them for 6 months. And in that 6 months, maybe the matchmaker guaranteed a number of matches or guaranteed some kind of coaching, but there is no guarantee of results, right? So at the end of those 6 months, if your friend walked away without dating somebody for a prolonged period of time or a match that was quote unquote successful, that was it. They paid their lump sum. They moved on with their life. You, however, once again, as an entrepreneur that you are, view the matchmaking compensation model a little bit differently. And can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to starting this business. When I first started, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. And that comes with the territory. I had no idea I was going to be a Jewish matchmaker and dating coach. So of course I had no idea how to get compensated for it. But I decided that I was going to give it about 6 months of doing it totally for free and see how things operated. And as I talked to people, I spoke to many individuals who, like you said, worked with a long-time professional matchmaker. Most of those professional matchmakers have very similar pricing models. Like you said, lump sum upfront, they're guaranteed a certain outcome or certain results. But a lot of times, those certain results that they're guaranteed are a number of dates being set up with a certain number of people. It's not, I guarantee you that you're going to find your person, which obviously, because no matchmaker can guarantee that. With that in mind, though, I thought about my friend, for example, the one who called me, who signed up for a 6-month contract, and the second or third person that he went out with was someone who was really interesting to him. By spending more time getting to know this person, he then lost out on additional time with his contract. And I think that idea is really problematic for daters, because I never want a dater to say, I don't want to continue getting to know this person who I think might be kind of awesome because I want to see who the other 3 people you have in mind are. That's the same problem that daters are dealing with on dating apps. So what am I going to do? I have to do something differently. And I decided from that, why don't I do it monthly? Why don't I have people come on as VIP clients monthly? And if they meet someone that they really like, they can take a break and they can get to know that person, and then they can come back later if they need to. God willing, they won't need to, but they can come back later if they need to, and they can become a client again. And I thought this was brilliant. I was really excited about it. But what I realized is that there are so many people who need this help. And by doing it this way, as a single person matchmaker with no team, I was limiting myself to searching endlessly around the clock for a handful of people each month. And I was leaving all the rest of the people who were in the pool with very little time for me to focus on them. While it works for the people who are in that VIP group, it doesn't work for everybody. And I kind of came back to my core mission, which is more strong Jewish families through strong Jewish relationships. If I'm trying to create more strong Jewish relationships, I can't only focus on a handful of people a month. I have to focus on way more people than that. So I decided to change it up a little bit more. Starting in late October, I was kind of iterating on the process, trying to come up with different new ways to do it. And I decided that I'd go with a calendar model. It's very similar to the way that I ran Minutes for Moms, my other business, in the fact that it's a la carte. And I think that is really special for people like us because young Jewish professionals are on a budget. We're all early in our careers. We don't have the money to be shelling out, hundreds of dollars on dating every month. And that's before we're buying outfits and getting ready and paying for dates and all of these things. It's expensive. We just don't have for that, or most of us don't have for that. And so this way, I could open up the opportunity to work with me on a more personal basis to more people, and they could buy time a la carte where they're getting special dedicated search time or special dedicated chatting time with me to get coached, to get support, any of the things that I offer, but on a much smaller basis. So they have the opportunity to book as much time or as little time as they need or want based on their budget, their schedule, what they're looking for. And the people who want that VIP feel, have even more flexibility because they're not coming and signing a contract for an entire month. They can decide, oh, I'm going to focus on dating for the first 3 weeks of the month, and then I have vacation. So I'm going to book all of my time with Delaney for those first 3 weeks. And that's totally fine. Other people might decide, I'm going to book the first week of the month, see what happens. If I go on a date, maybe I'm going to book a date debrief and go forward from there. I'm not going to book a bunch of matchmaking blocks in a row. All of this to say, I have a lot of different options and people can piece together what they need instead of committing to a huge contract. And I think this is really cool because it puts the power in the hands of the dater. They get to decide what the matchmaking experience should look like for them and what they need and want.
I love that. I think it's very interesting and contrary to what a lot of traditional matchmakers will say, which their whole thesis has been like, we know that you think you know what you want, but we know best. Pay us $6,000 and for 3 months, we will give you 10 dates. This notion that you don't know what's best for you, it's condescending to the consumer, to the buyers. So I like what you're doing and it resonates with me. My theory, maybe I'm a little too naive or optimistic, is I believe that AI could fix the dating issue. And here's how. If you have a pool, let's say you have a pool of 1,000 people, 500 women, 500 men, and they're all interested in heterosexual relationships. I think there's a way where you could have them rank everybody, fill out an extensive form about who they are, what they're looking for, their preferences, whatever. Every single person in the pool. There is a Pareto efficient way to match up the 500 men to the 500 women. You might not get your first choice, but I have to believe that there is a Pareto efficient way to create these matches. And some of them will be successful. I just wish there was a tool for that. All these dating apps, they have so much data about every single person. And at the same time, they have no incentive to create connections because as much as Hinge likes to market that they're designed to be deleted, quote unquote, they only operate based on usage. So it's in their best interest to keep the user coming back to the app. They don't actually want to be deleted.
Absolutely. I think the entire landscape for dating apps changed after these companies exited. Now that we're in the place that we are, I think the user experience for dating apps has gone completely downhill. I think the other part of it too that's different from a lot of the bigger Jewish matchmakers is it's different from shidduch dating in that they're paying the lump sum up front. And in my case, which I didn't include before, I tell people when they first meet with me at the very start of the experience that my fees up front are very small. They're meant to be approachable. They're meant to be affordable. They're for young Jewish professionals. However, if you get engaged, there's a fee called shadchanas geld, which is like a success fee should I set you up with your person. So that fee varies from person to person, family to family, but essentially it's an amount that is on the larger side, it's meaningful, and it feels appropriate for both parties, and each party separately or their families pays that fee together to the matchmaker.
This is another thing that I have been saying for a while, and all the Jewish matchmakers told me, hell no, Margarita. I think matchmaking should work like the real estate model. What do I mean? When you're in the market to buy a house, you hire an agent. The agent is your advocate. They're helping you find the inventory that you're interested in. They're helping you negotiate the best deal, and they only get paid when you buy a house. And the same thing with matchmaking. Matchmakers should get paid when a match is successful. So I love that you add that. Now, when I've spoken to more traditional matchmakers, the ones that charge the lump sum, their concern with waiting to get paid until there's like an engagement or an outcome, one, they feel it's kind of a liability because it's hard to enforce the payment once it's occurred. But the other more honest answer is they would end up having to work for free for a very long time before they see any results of their labor. Because in the real estate market, you see a house and you jump on it, you buy, and you want to make sure you're not outbid, right? So there's a speed component. With relationships, people could date, I don't know, for 7 years before they get engaged. And then that matchmaker is never going to see any money. So that real estate model isn't foolproof because no one's ever going to get paid on that model alone. So I like that you've blended both of them together so that there's something that you can get compensated for in the immediate, but then also a more meaningful contribution once there's an engagement or a marriage.
Yeah, and I think the blend is really key because when you look at the matchmakers who are matching the more observant, more Orthodox Jewish community, those matchmakers are setting up many engagements per year because their couples that they're getting together are getting engaged after typically weeks or months, versus for me, my clientele is going to likely get engaged between 2 to 3 years from when they first start dating. Like you said, it's definitely an honor system. It is written in Jewish law, but it is an honor system. And I really hope that people do follow through with that because it is a huge part of how I factor in my compensation model. But like you said, I blend the two so that it's possible for me to do this on my own, now.
And pivoting a little bit to the coaching side, the dating coaching side of your business, talk to me about the priceless pieces of advice that you give to your clients when you coach them.
I think one of the biggest things that daters need to realize is that it's extremely challenging to know how to choose best for yourself when you're dating intentionally. Every decision feels like it carries so much weight. That's why it's important to have a neutral mentor to help you. Finding somebody who has a good idea of what the landscape looks like in full in your location for what you're looking for is really important. Someone who has your best interest in mind, someone who understands that you're not going to get every single thing on your wish list and can prioritize what actually matters from what doesn't. You don't need to do it alone, and I don't think you should. There's so much advice out there, from podcasts to Instagram to every possible place, courses. There's so much out there to help daters, but it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. And I think that's why it's really important to find someone who's neutral and level-headed and there to help you find your person. That being said, while I say not all advice is one size fits all, one of my favorite pieces of advice that I have given, and it's not for everyone, but I do think it's really important, is Mishaneh Makom, Mishaneh Mazal. I think if you change your place, you change your luck. And for me, I did that personally. I moved from where I'm from, the DMV area, to Florida because I felt like I had seen it all where I was and I wasn't finding my person, and I really needed to have some change. I needed new people in my dating pool. I needed to feel a different energy. And so I scanned the country and found a place that felt like it fit my criteria for living a positive, amazing life. And I picked St. Petersburg, Florida. Even beyond that, I decided one weekend that this feels a little too cold for me. And I went down to Naples for the weekend, and that's where I met my boyfriend. So I think that it's really important to be flexible and to be willing to try new things and get out of your comfort zone, even if that means picking up for a little bit and traveling for a few months or moving across the country. I think people are really stuck in the picture that they've created for themselves and how they imagine meeting their person, that they're not willing to get outside of that.
This is actually such an interesting point that I think about a lot. Like living in the New York City area, one, it's notoriously a hard city to date. Doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish. The lifestyle of New York is not conducive to settling down. It's just not. And so I often think about, I love my life here. I am meant to be here. I feel that in my kishkas, okay? I know for sure that with the work that I do, the industry I'm in, with the podcast, like I very much belong here. And at the same time, I am aware that the type of guy I want likely does not live here. And so I don't know what to do because I'm at this point where it's like, am I going to uproot my life for the chance to maybe meet somebody somewhere else? And that chance is not guaranteed. And then if I fail, I will regret that I moved from the city I love and belong in. And this is also coming from somebody, like I've lived in New York, LA, SF, Miami, and Philadelphia. I've tried almost every major city in the US with a sizable Jewish population. I don't know. I agree with you. I think you're right. And I think your method works. And personally, I'm like, why do I have to sacrifice so much?
I think for someone like you, and I very much relate to this, I talk about it to my friends all the time. When I was single, I could not help myself but talk about it nearly every day. But I think when you've lived so many different lives and you have so much life experience, it becomes so hard to find someone who can match you there. And I think that's really important for people like us to find someone who's equally as interesting and passionate and wanting to make a difference in the world and really get every drop of life out of every minute that we're living. And living in New York, like you said, it's extremely challenging. But a lot of times, I think people in New York are exposed to so many people who are in the exact same boat. And there's always a comparison aspect. There's so many people available. It causes decision paralysis. It's obviously exacerbated by the dating apps. But I think that people who are in a place that's not quite as big as New York are able to more easily pick out people who match their values and resonate with their life because there's not as many people to pick from.
But also they're willing to be content with 80%, whereas people who have dozens of options, hundreds of options, they're going to keep trying to push for, I'm 90% satisfied, I'm 95% satisfied. Like if you know you have 10 Jewish guys to pick from, you're going to pick the best one you have, even if that best one is not 100% what you want. But if you have 10,000 guys to pick from, you're going to keep looking and looking until you find the highest possible satisfaction level. In some sense, I envy people who like met their high school sweetheart or whatever, or like met the guy that they're married to in college, because like how easy must it be to be just content with what you have? Like I can't relate.
I totally understand. I can't relate to that one either. And I think going back to that part I talked about before with my parents met right out of college. Their parents introduced them. They met at the Naval Academy Chapel at Friday night services for Shabbat. That was it. They were engaged in 6 months and married 9 months after that. So for so many people, seeing so many people around them, especially people close to them, make it happen so simply and so easily, it's frustrating. And it can feel sometimes like something's wrong with you. But I think really it just takes more effort. You might have to travel more places. And I know you mentioned that fear of leaving New York when it feels so core to who you are and it feels in your bones that you be there. Something as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to sublease my apartment for 3 months and I'm going to try somewhere new and I'm going to give that place a real shot for 3 months. I'm not uprooting my life. I'm just giving it a shot. If you have that opportunity to work remote, to make a little change like that, absolutely 100% take it. It really matters where you choose to go because every different city across the country has a different culture, has different people. And a lot of times I end up talking to people about that because I see the whole landscape across the country. I have people in nearly every major city across the country in my database. I can see the trends. I can see what people are looking for. I end up talking to people about it. If they want to try a new place, what might be the right place for them? And I think that 2-3 month commitment to try something new gives you the opportunity to get a flavor for another place, to meet new people and expand your network, because dating is networking, without making a full-time commitment to uproot your life.
I love that. Listen, if you tell me that I need to go to Utah or wherever you think I got to go, I may take you up on that. People do want to know, we'll go on a little road trip. A camper van. Anyway, tell me this, Delaney. How can people connect with you on social media and learn more about your matchmaking service?
Okay, I'm very active on Instagram at Dating by Delaney. So definitely follow along. I post tons and tons of updates on my stories. I also get the help of the crowdsource matches. So if you're not single, but you're wanting to help and be involved in the process, definitely follow along because I would love to connect with you and I would love to be connected to people in your network. Also, if you're not on Instagram, you can connect with me on LinkedIn using my full name, Delaney Fox.
Thank you. And I have one final question for you. It's one that I ask every single guest of the podcast. Who would you like to nominate for People You Want to Know?
Okay. The person I would like to nominate, Shelby Weiss, is originally from Jacksonville, Florida. She currently lives in Washington, D.C., where she is a media relations liaison for a pro-Israel think tank. She handles the publicity, reputation, and media appearances for the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, which advises policymakers on how to navigate relationships with countries in the Middle East.
Oof, you came prepared. You had like bio and everything. This is awesome. Thank you so much for this nomination, Delaney. It's been a real pleasure to have you on today.
Thanks, Margarita. It was so much fun chatting with you, and I hope we'll chat soon. Maybe for a date setup.
Please. BH, as I like to say. Bizrat Hashem. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People You Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People You Want to Know.